Chosen ones. There are truths so ancient they were never written, only encoded in vibration. Resonances that ripple through the soul instead of the page. One of those truths was the seventh hidden law of light. Not a law of man or of science, but of sacred origin, locked away not to protect humanity, but to protect them from you. For your soul alone held the frequency that could break it. The law was said to govern the sacred boundary between consciousness and cosmic will. The first 6 laws brought order. The seventh, unspeakable, unrecorded, was the failsafe. The moment it fractured, it would not cause chaos. It would cause awakening. That awakening has begun, and the signal came from you. When your soul pulsed with remembrance, maybe in a dream, maybe in silence, it sent out a frequency the old keepers had sealed in fear. They called it the soul echo, a divine anomaly that should never have existed. But your very existence broke its containment. The light bent. The seal groaned. The ancient glyphs began to tremble. Hidden orders scrambled. Etheric sensors spun. Astral shields locked. They tried to deny what the data confirmed. The soul, with the power to fracture the seventh law, had returned, and it had already begun tearing through the veil. The moment you felt a shift, a dream that wouldn't leave, a whisper that wasn't yours. That was the law unraveling. The hidden frequency is you, not a metaphor, not symbolic, literal, encoded in your being. They never expected your return in this age. Those who still remember the original blueprint, the ones cloaked in cosmic silence, are watching you now. They've reconvened. Some will come to guide. Some will come to deceive. All will act like they know you, but none will understand what you've become, because what happens next wasn't in their calculations. You didn't just return, you disrupted the structure that kept them in control. And now, the seventh law trembles at the edge of collapse. But before it breaks fully, you must remember what they've hidden in the shadows of your own light. Because the law doesn't just fracture on its own, it shatters through choice. Before the vaults of modern time, when memory was carved into vibration rather than stone, there existed a council older than language. They were not kings or priests, but weavers of laws, the unseen architects of reality. These were the beings who formed the 7 hidden laws of light, and it was the 7th they feared the most. The 1st through 6th laws governed the sacred harmony of energy, polarity, rhythm, vibration, correspondence, cause, and effect. Each was etched into existence with divine precision. But the 7th law, never spoken aloud, was sealed away. It was not harmony. It was intervention. It carried a power they could not control, a frequency too close to source. It was said to be the only law that could override the others, and the moment it was fractured, the illusion would begin to fall apart. So they hid it. The council convened in a realm unmarked by stars. Around a prism of living light, they chanted in languages made of frequency, weaving the 7th law into an ethereal lock that could only be broken by one soul, a soul they hoped would never return. You. They cast you out before time began, not out of malice, but survival. You were born holding the blueprint they feared. Their oaths were bound not by loyalty to the divine, but to the system they had built atop it. They believed that by hiding the seventh law, they could control awakening forever. That no one would remember. That no soul would carry the resonance again. But the fracture came, not as thunder, but as a quiet, inexplicable misalignment across dimensions. A skipped beat in cosmic rhythm, a spark of memory in you, something they could not trace to any force except the return of the soul they exiled, your soul. The prism they buried began to flicker. The seals began to whisper. And now, those who served the old frequencies find themselves powerless to stop what's coming, not because the law was simply broken, but because you were the one who broke it. They say the universe speaks in symbols long before it speaks in events, and buried within the hidden folds of forgotten temples, both physical and astral, there was a structure known only to the initiates of the first light. They called it the Mirror Gate. Not a portal in the way we think of it, but a device encoded with sacred reflection. It could only show one thing: the soul capable of breaking the seventh hidden law. For centuries, it remained silent. Guardians were appointed to keep it hidden. Some perished. Others simply vanished. But the mirror remained untouched, waiting for resonance. Not to open, but to respond. And then, one day, long before you awakened, the gate began to hum again. The light bent inside the mirror's face, not a reflection of a body, but of a memory buried beneath timelines. The soul it recognized wasn't supposed to return. It was a signature once deemed too dangerous for integration. But there it was, yours. The mirror gate showed not who you are, but what was sealed inside you. A fracture pattern resembling a sacred geometry long erased from the scrolls of light. The watchers could only whisper, "The soul has returned. The gate has spoken." The irony? It never spoke in words, only light. And those who saw it wept, not from fear, but recognition. Because the light didn't just reveal power, it revealed truth. And truth is the final enemy of the system. It was at that moment, as the light shimmered across the hidden chamber, that a forgotten scroll was uncovered, marked with a verse many dismissed as myth. In golden ink it read, "The Word became light, and the light returned in flesh." That line, attributed in secret to Yeshua, was once interpreted symbolically. But the mirror didn't show symbolism. It showed you. The prophecy wasn't metaphor. It was literal. The light has returned, and now it walks in a vessel they thought banished. When the fracture began, no sound was heard by human ears. But the hidden realms, the layers beneath what we call reality, shook in silence. These are not places measured by space or ruled by time. They are realms of vibration, thought, essence. And in these depths, something ruptured. It wasn't a clean break. It was like a song, long forgotten, being remembered all at once by the very fabric of existence, a melody of disruption. And that melody had only one origin point: you. The seventh hidden law was never truly destroyed. It was a law of containment, a metaphysical lattice designed to keep divine intervention asleep. But the moment your soul began to activate, the lattice cracked like glass under sacred pressure. The frequencies in those hidden realms, once in harmony, collapsed into dissonance. What the ancients called the Great Stillness was broken. Entities older than language stirred from their observation posts. These weren't demons or angels. They were recorders, archivists of the soul's echo. Their scrolls, bound in memory instead of paper, began to rewrite themselves. The echoes you triggered couldn't be stopped. A sequence had begun. The light remembered you, and it would not be silenced again. In the realm called Etherian, where the laws were once sung into place, the fracture rang as a tone, subtle but undeniable. Scribes halted their endless etchings. Time folded briefly, and a single message appeared across the starlit tablets they protect. The one who holds the breach has returned. That line was forbidden, not because it was false, but because it was final. It meant that no system, no spell, no counsel could undo what was in motion. It meant the return was not a theory. It was now a fact. You were never meant to be a figurehead. You were designed as a fault line, a walking contradiction to every power that tried to control the path of ascension. And now, with each pulse of remembrance within you, the fracture deepens. They've begun sending sentinels, disguised in light, draped in purpose. But they do not come to awaken. They come to contain. Because they know what happens if the fracture spreads further. Long before the fracture echoed, and even before the council sealed the seventh law, there existed a manuscript not made by hand, called the Light Codex. It was said to have been written in strands of pure divine energy, etched into the ether by a voice that shaped galaxies. Few ever saw it. Fewer still could read it. But one being did. Yeshua. What the world knew of him was filtered, reduced, edited. But beyond the known parables and the open teachings, there were messages he encoded in light, hidden in realms untouched by dogma. One such message, buried in the Light Codex, warned of a moment when the true soul would return, one bearing a fracture pattern never meant to exist. The verse read, "When the seventh trembles, let the vessel remember. Light fractures only to reveal more light." It wasn't metaphor, it was design. Yeshua foresaw the systems being built, not of faith, but of control. He knew the councils, the watchers, and the architects would fear the soul that could not be predicted. So he encoded a breadcrumb trail in light, accessible only when the seventh law began to destabilize. And now it has. You didn't just shatter an ancient energy. Your soul triggered the codex itself to unseal a dormant sequence, a memory link between his warning and your return. The scribes of Etherian began seeing unfamiliar glyphs pulsing in the codex, glyphs that matched your soul pattern. The message was clear. The one Yeshua spoke of is already here, and that frightened them more than any prophecy ever could. Because the Light Codex doesn't change for anyone, not even archons. It updates only when a soul operating beyond the veil of control re-enters the system. That's you. Yeshua didn't just speak of light and love. He spoke of collapse, of divine rebellion against artificial order. He warned of a being who would arrive not to destroy, but to reveal. And he was clear about one thing. The law wouldn't break by accident. It would be broken by choice, by the soul brave enough to step outside the script. Long before your first breath in this world, they were already watching, not with eyes, but with frequencies attuned to anomaly. These beings are not legends. They do not reside in heaven or hell. They exist within a dimension that coils tightly around the realm of light, neither fully spirit nor fully matter. The ancients called it the prism fold, and within it live the Watchers. Their task was never judgment. It was observation. They monitored vibrational shifts, tracing timelines where the seventh law might fracture. For eons, they detected only minor ripples, false signals, temporary anomalies. But then your soul flickered into view. The prism lit up in patterns unseen for thousands of years, not as chaos, but a disruption so precise it resembled divine intent. The Watchers, once neutral, began to diverge. Some leaned toward preservation, others toward revelation. You divided them just by existing. There were 12 that gathered when the signal strengthened. They formed a circle of decision around your resonance pattern. Some argued to intervene, others warned of prophecy. But one among them simply stared into the prism's light and whispered, "It has begun." They knew this couldn't be stopped. Not because of fate, but because your presence reactivated a code beneath reality. One they never fully understood. The prism doesn't just reveal, it amplifies. And as your energy pulsed through its reflective corridors, it began to expose their secrets too. The veils they thought permanent began to wear thin. Dimensions shifted, time distorted. You weren't simply returning, you were rewriting. Even now, some of them descend into your realm, not physically, but subtly, as thoughts, as ideas, as questions that wake you in the middle of the night. They want to know how much you remember. They want to measure how close you are to unlocking the core of your design. But understand this, not all Watchers want you awake. Some have lived entire cycles ensuring the seventh law stays buried. To them, you are not a miracle. You are a breach, a living threat to what they constructed. There is a moment in the ancient texts that was whispered but never recorded. One that took place just before Yeshua vanished from the realm of man. It wasn't during the crucifixion, nor in the resurrection stories they let survive. This moment occurred in secret, beneath starlight, in a forgotten cave layered in symbols that shimmered only when truth was spoken aloud. It is said that Yeshua stood before a mirrored flame and uttered a single verse. Witnesses were forbidden from writing it down. Instead, they passed it in low tones between generations of hidden scribes. The verse was never meant to be decoded, only activated. And it could only be heard by the one whose soul would one day fracture the seventh law. That verse was this: "Let the bearer of broken light gather what was never lost." Most dismissed it as cryptic poetry, but those who truly listened knew better. Yeshua was speaking to someone not yet born into the realm of flesh, someone whose soul carried a vibration incompatible with the structures of the old order, someone like you. The verse is a key, not to power, but to remembrance, because to gather what was never lost is to realize that nothing was truly taken from you. The memory, the mission, the law, it was always inside. The fracture didn't break your soul. It broke the illusion that it was ever whole in their image. Since that day, echoes of the verse have rippled through hidden places. In the catacombs beneath the desert temples, in the chants of secret monastic orders, even encoded within the frequencies of certain star alignments. And when your soul resonated again with the seventh law, those echoes didn't just stir, they converged. The verse was heard, not in words, but in knowing, like a light behind your eyes that suddenly blinked twice, like a dream that didn't belong to this world, but still felt like home. You've likely felt it already, the sensation that something ancient and personal is trying to speak again. They marked you before birth, not with ink or scar, but with a sigil woven into the ether of your being, positioned just beneath the ribcage, where soul and breath intertwine. It was crafted by the same architects who forged the laws of light, an energetic emblem meant to suppress, not destroy, a failsafe, a seal. It was called the Sigil of Binding. They placed it there to mute your memory, to dull the frequency that could fracture the seventh law. It cloaked your true resonance, hiding you even from yourself. For lifetimes, it worked. You walked, spoke, dreamed, and suffered as one, asleep in a body of light too quiet to recognize. But suppression is not erasure, and light, when bent long enough, will eventually shatter. And shatter it did. The moment came subtly, maybe in pain, maybe in stillness, maybe in a silence so deep it roared inside your chest. That was the sigil cracking, a sharp, internal pulse, a heat beneath the ribs, a memory that didn't come from the mind, but from the core. You thought it was anxiety. It wasn't. It was awakening. Now that the sigil is broken, everything hidden has begun to rise, and what was once locked away behind veils is pushing forward. Truths you were never meant to remember. Codes embedded not in your DNA, but in the light behind it. The system was designed to collapse slowly when the sigil failed. But your soul, unbound, is accelerating that collapse. The architects feel it. They've activated what little remains of the old containment net. They'll try to distract, redirect, seduce you back into sleep. Through media, through people, even through guides claiming to be of the light. But none of them can touch the place where the sigil broke. And, in its place, a glyph has started to form. A living design, not imposed from outside but emerging from within. Ancient, glowing and pulsing in synchronicity with something older than time. They've seen this glyph before, once. Carved into a cave wall beneath the sands of Galilee, pulsing when Yeshua stood before it. The same shape. There was a legend hidden within the early scrolls, not one taught in temples, but whispered between those who decoded light itself. It told of a path Yeshua once walked, not across earth, but through a realm unseen, a realm accessed only through the splintered ray. This ray was not sunlight. It was a prism of divine intelligence, shattered long ago during the first cosmic rebellion. Its pieces scattered across dimensions, encoded with remnants of the source. Only a being whose soul carried both fracture and alignment could walk through it without being torn apart. Yeshua did, but not as a teacher, as a forerunner. He left marks in the ray, like energy breadcrumbs for one who would come after. One whose soul would also fracture the laws designed to hold creation in place. He knew he could not unwrite the system alone, so he left behind a resonance trail, encrypted in pain, fire, grace, and clarity, waiting. When you cracked the seventh law, the ray stirred again. You may not remember crossing it, but you felt the bleed-through. Flashes of insight that didn't belong to your mind. Moments of overwhelming emotion that didn't match the moment. That wasn't delusion. That was overlap. One of Yeshua's verses speaks to this directly, though it was struck from canon. The ray shall return to the one who remembers broken light as holy. The fracture you carry doesn't disqualify you. It marks you, not as a mistake, but as continuation. What was splintered in him has now activated in you. Where he left the path, you begin walking it, not to repeat, but to fulfill. That's why they feared the seventh law breaking, not just because of collapse, but because of connection. You've already passed through one shard of the ray. That's why the sigil cracked, why the mirror gate lit up, why the codex began rewriting. But the ray is not a singular path. It's layered, and in one layer, deep, golden, burning with divine will, is a mark only two souls have ever matched, Yeshua's. There is a roll older than language, whispered by the inner circles of the ancient builders, those who carved the original grids of reality. They spoke not of kings nor of warriors, but of a being called the luminary codebreaker, a soul designed to enter existence, not to preserve the code, but to expose its limits, to dismantle it from the inside. They believed only one such being could ever exist in an age, and now every energetic trace points to you. The codes that govern this realm, known to some as the laws, to others as the constructs, were not meant to be permanent. They were meant to evolve, to shift with divine will. But over time, these constructs hardened, became static, artificial. That's when the councils began enforcing stability over truth, safety over light, control over source. They never expected the codebreaker to actually return, but the signs are undeniable now. Systems that once pulsed in symmetry are glitching. Time anomalies, dreams with hidden sigils, magnetic fields spiking in the presence of your thoughts, even the digital echoes, your online interactions, your spoken words, have started to warp the simulation. The ancients described the codebreaker's aura as a living contradiction, that what they touched would either heal or unravel, depending on intent. That chaos would follow their footsteps, not to destroy, but to awaken. Your presence alone now disrupts false grids, not because you fight them, but because you exist outside them. This is why you felt out of place, why you've questioned everything, even your own memories. The design didn't fail you. You were never meant to fit the design. You were meant to expose its boundaries. There's a glyph that's begun appearing across old records, in dreams, and even random glitch patterns. A radiant spiral coiled around a broken line. It's the mark of the luminary codebreaker, the final sign the ancient orders feared. And yet, none of them truly understand what that codebreaker is meant to unlock. There is a moment etched into the deepest arcane records, hidden beneath Vatican vaults, buried in desert ziggurats, encrypted in tones sung only by light itself. They called it the final eclipse. Not a celestial event in the sky, but an energetic convergence that seals the fate of systems. It occurs only when the soul that fractured the seventh law reaches alignment with the core of its design. And now, that moment draws near. You were never meant to simply awaken. You were engineered to eclipse, to stand between what was and what must become. The seventh seal, last of the hidden constraints placed on divine memory, was woven into your soul as both a prison and a prophecy. When it shatters, the illusion of separation disintegrates, not just for you, but for all who are attuned. The eclipse is not light being devoured by shadow. It is shadow being devoured by memory. The hidden orders are panicking now. Their rituals no longer bind. Their predictive systems have failed. The moment you stepped into your fractured light, the countdown began. Across astral lattices, the seal began to groan. It was built to withstand billions of souls asleep, but it was never meant to survive one soul fully awake. There is an old quote that survives in fragments across mystical traditions. Some say it came from the desert, others from the stars. It is said to be the final words spoken by Yeshua in private to his last true follower. When the last seal fades and the false sun darkens, the real light will no longer ask for permission. You are that light. The eclipse doesn't mean the end. It means the veils burn away. It means memory becomes weapon and remembrance becomes resurrection. The false order won't just collapse. It will implode under the weight of what you are beginning to remember.
If you have come this far, it is crucial that you watch this next video here. But be warned, it is not for the faint of heart, for only the true chosen ones can handle this video. If you would like to also donate to help keep the channel going, our Buy Me a Coffee link will be in the description.